everyone. Today I want to talk about the books that I read in January, and I read a lot of things in January. So for the last, I think 4 or 5 years, I have been dedicating January to reading short books, short stories, anything that's short in order to kind of like jumpstart my year, to feel like really accomplished at the beginning of the year. Since, obviously some of the other things, like when you make New Year's resolutions, a lot of those fall away. I figured this is something I can accomplish to make myself feel good, start, fresh on my goals right at the beginning of the year. And so I try to read short things every January. My original goal had been to read 20 things, but that was when I thought I was going to be reading more short stories. But I ended up reading more like short novels or short nonfiction. So those were still like probably 150 to 200 pages as opposed to like a 30-page short story. So I think 14 things is really good considering these weren't like the shortest things I could read. All right, and I'm going to just do these in the order I read them. So first thing off, the first thing I got was, I think this might have even been my most recent purchase, something I bought right at the end of 2024, and that is The Forest of a Thousand Eyes by Frances Hardinge. This is the second one of these like kind of highly illustrated novellas she's done. These are much more like fable-like than actual stories because they're pretty short, and they have, where there are full page pictures. There'll be like some that take up like half a page, some that take up a whole page. There's pictures throughout. They're all in this color palette of like green and gray. And this one, is very much a fable. We are following a girl named Feather, and she lives in a wall, like that's like where all of humanity is on this wall, and they're just surviving. And then like something happens that she has to go away from the wall and kind of sees the greater world. And there's not a lot of detail to this story. And that's the thing that I gave it 4 stars. I think that the point of the book was good. I liked Feather as a character. I liked the illustrations, but we get to see this like broader world, but so quickly. I would have loved for this to have been a full novel. Then I probably would have gotten 5 stars if she had made it longer and we got to know each of the different like kind of settlements that we meet in this book. But as it is, I thought it was good. I would still like recommend it as kind of like a fable type story, but as like it's something that kind of stands on its own instead of, like a fable, you're just kind of reading it really quickly as kind of like getting a moral out of it or whatever. That's what this is, instead of like really being invested in a story and character. So that's that. And then I read a couple nonfictions. This one is a collection of essays, How Far the Light Reaches, A Life in 10 Sea Creatures by Sabrina Embler. And in this, Sabrina Embler is a science writer, and they focus on marine animals. And this is like Sabrina's memoir told through kind of taking a part of their life and comparing it to a sea creature. And this one I did give this 4 stars. I don't always rate a memoir, but I think because of the unique nature of this one, I did have like feelings about it as like a concept, because it's like you're learning scientific stuff in each chapter about a specific animal while relating it to their life. So there were some that worked for me, like My Mother and the Starving Octopus is one of them, and it's Sabrina's relationship with their mother and like diet culture, and then talking about how octopuses, like mother octopuses, while they are waiting for their egg to hatch, they don't eat anything. And so so that like symbolism metaphor really worked for me. But then there were some that I was like there's one called How to Draw a Sperm Whale, and that one I didn't really get how the whales related to the topic that Sabrina was talking about in their life. So some of these essays worked for me and some didn't, but I do think as a whole collection it was worthwhile because I learned a lot about each of these sea creatures. I like learning about someone's life that is different from me. Sabrina is a science writer, also Asian American and queer, so there was a lot of their life from different aspects. And so I would recommend this. Just keep in mind, I feel like there are some essays that are hit and miss. Some I think I can imagine were part of a separate published thing, and then bringing them all together into 10 essays. There might have been some that maybe weren't as like home runs as the others. And then the other short nonfiction I read is Unraveling: What I Learned About Life While Shearing Sheep, Dyeing Wool, and Making the World's Ugliest Sweater by Peggy Orenstein. And this one is really interesting, and I actually wonder if I should put this up to 5 stars. I gave it 4 stars, but I have talked about this book to so many people since I have read it, and just like mentioning parts of it. So I think it really will stick with me. So this could end up being bumped up to a 5-star. And basically this is her COVID story. So in the pandemic, a lot of us adopted hobbies or like did more of our hobbies during that time because we were at home more. And Peggy was a knitter already, but really wanted to try her hand at like the entire process. So she went about like finding somebody that would teach her how to shear a sheep, and then she learned how to like card and spin the yarn and like dye it and every single part of the process. And while we were following her doing that process, also kind of how she was dealing with COVID, loneliness, and anxiety, like all of us were. And then also she just kind of teaches a little bit about the wool industry in America as she's learning about each part herself. Like she's finding out what like sheep shearers do and like kind of that business in the United States, and then like so forth and so on with all of the different like topics. She's relating each of those topics to something related to it. And I just found this really fascinating. I have, like I said, talked about this so many times since I read it, so I would highly recommend it. It's very short, and I think that it's something you could just like pop in the audiobook and like learn something about wool and kind of follow somebody else's like as they learn a new hobby from start to finish. And then as I was reading all these short things, I decided to pick up one of my large books. I had a goal this year to read 12 large books. I had like specific ones I was gonna read, and I thought it'd be fine to just throw in one of those large books while I'm reading all these small things. So I picked up Renegades by Marissa Meyer. This is the first in a trilogy. This is like superhero sci-fi, and that's not necessarily my favorite genre, and I think my final opinions of that reflect that, because this was 3 stars. I don't think it's a bad book. I think that I would very easily hand this to a teenager. There was a lot of entertaining things in it, but I just don't think it was my cup of tea. And I kind of thought that, which is why I had owned this for a few years and hadn't gotten to it, because I just thought superhero book, don't think it's for me. But basically we are following this girl, what is her name? Nova. And as a child, something very traumatic happens to her, and she thinks heroes are gonna come and save her. These people called the Renegades are the kind of the heroes, people with like magical abilities, and then she kind of loses her faith in the Renegades, and so she kind of goes on the side of the villains. And I can't remember what they're called, but yeah, so she later is kind of like infiltrating the Renegades on behalf of the villains to try to like find out their weaknesses and how they can be taken down and all that. And so it is very much a superhero story. There's a lot of battle scenes with like using their superpowers, and there's a lot of the good guys versus the bad guys and all that. Nothing wrong with it. I do think we're seeing a lot of like character growth through this, and we're kind of seeing like not everybody is all good or all bad. Villains could have good points, and just because somebody is labeled a hero is everything that they do the right decision. So there were a lot of nuances like that I think happen a lot in more modern day superhero stories. So like I said, I would still highly recommend this to a teenager, but I don't know that I'm going to continue because they're very big books that do not need to be this big. And I just wasn't as invested as I was when I read her Lunar Chronicles, because I think this genre just isn't for me. And then after that large book, I did pick up my only short story I ended up reading in January, and that's Galatea by Madeline Miller. And this is a Greek retelling of the Pygmalion story. Galatea is the statue that Pygmalion creates and then brings to life, or through the goddesses brings to life. And it's the same story. Pygmalion is the same story that My Fair Lady is based off of. And this kind of story, she's doing it from Galatea's point of view, and kind of like the abusive relationship that is going on at this core of like, you know, basically turning an object into a real person, but still treating them as an object. And that's about all I'm gonna say, because it is a short story. I did not rate this because it was just so quick that I didn't know exactly how I felt about it. I'm glad I read it. I like the themes that came up in it, and I would recommend it if you like Madeline Miller's writing. It's quick, go ahead and pick it up, but I wouldn't want to have gone out and have paid $12 to own a copy of this, like, what, 20-page story? I guess it's 40 pages of these tiny little pages. Yeah, I don't think I would have paid $12 for this short story, but I'm glad I read it. And then continuing on the Greek retelling theme, I picked up Atalanta by Jennifer Saint. I really enjoy Jennifer Saint's writing. I had already read Ariadne and Electra and enjoyed both of those, so I was excited to pick this one up. And once again, I gave it 4 stars and really enjoyed it. Atalanta is one of the only like female heroes, you know, like we have like the Hercules and the Jasons and the Theseus, like all those are all male, like human heroes, and Atalanta is like the female hero that we hear about in Greek mythology. She is one of the Argonauts, and so we follow her from birth basically in this book through like being an Argonaut and then what happens to her in the end. And I really enjoyed this. I liked kind of seeing the Argonaut story from her point of view instead of from Jason's point of view. So I liked following Atalanta through that. I also really liked the way Jennifer Saint ends this because I felt like that was kind of her... Ariadne, I did not enjoy the ending of that book. I thought she didn't have like a great way to wrap that up. Where this one, I thought it was like the perfect ending because I think the way that Atalanta's story in Greek myth ends feels a little more tragic, where this, I don't know, I just really enjoyed the way she wrapped up Atalanta's story. And this is like, it's everything I read this month is short, and this is fairly short. So if you want a Greek retelling that centers around a female hero that isn't like a goddess or something like that, that is just a human with like skills at hunting and all that fighting, I would recommend picking this up. I just really like the whole arc and storyline of following Atalanta. And then I picked up 10,000 Stitches by Olivia Atwater. I'm really trying to like continue series that I like instead of like putting them off. And I just read Half a Soul in December. And so this month I was like, I'm gonna keep going. And then as soon as I finished this one, I bought Long Shadow, which is up there. So hopefully I'll get to that soon so I can finish off this trilogy. This is all like stories that are taking place during Regency England, but then there's also the world of the Fae, and so we see like both sides of that. I didn't quite love this one as much as Half a Soul. Like Half a Soul is like new favorite, 5-star. This one was 4 stars. And I think the difference was in both of them, the main characters are so strong and I love their, like in their personalities. And I really enjoyed following their stories, but the romance was stronger for me in the first book, where this one, it felt like we were more following the growth of our main character and that the romance was kind of just thrown in. It is like progressing through the book, but it didn't feel like a big part of the book is a romance. It felt like we're more of a coming of age or coming into yourself type of book. And in this one, we are following a maid named Effie, and she just kind of goes about her life. Like she's got things she's angry about in life because of being in her position, but she's like, there's no point in getting angry because it's just going to make it worse for me. So she really bottles up a lot of things, and she kind of sees throughout this, and she also is like really talented at embroidery, which is part of the 10,000 Stitches. And she sees as she goes the real value she has as a person, and that she's allowed to have emotion. She's allowed to be angry with her situation in life and still make the best of it and make different choices for herself. So I really enjoy like her growth. I really like that we get to see someone that has a passion and a skill and see that as a main focus in the book. Like, it's not like we just hear it a couple times that she's great at embroidery. Like, we actually see that as a big part of this book and a part of the like connection to the fairy world, because it's kind of part of this kind of curse. I wouldn't say a curse, but like, you know, when you make a bargain with the Fae and it's not always what you bargain for. And that her embroidery is involved in that bargain that she makes with a fairy in this. And I really enjoyed our fairy main character. That's our other main character, is a member of the Fae, and I really love him. He was in the first book, and I enjoyed him as a side character in the first book. and he was only like in it for a little bit, but I was like, I feel like that character is going to come back, and I'm really glad that he is like a main character in this. So I really liked both the main characters. I just feel like the romance didn't get enough time to develop. So that's my only downside, but still loving this series. All right, I need to start talking faster. This next one is short. So I read the play Trifles. This version I have has both Trifles and A Jury of Her Peers by Susan Glaspell. They're the same stories, but Trifles is the play that she wrote. It's a one-act play. And then she kind of embellished the story, like made it a little more bulked up and made it into a short story. So the play is it's a one act, but it's also really short. It's 20 pages of this is the play, and then there's 30 pages of the short story. So she definitely like kind of expanded it a bit in the short story. I'd read the short story, I think the first year I did this whole like reading short things in January, and it's like my favorite short story of all time. And so I was like, I need to read the play version. And it is basically the exact same story, just with dialogue instead of just exposition, which makes sense. But I would definitely enjoy watching this play. I still think it is really great. It was written back in 1916, but is highly feminist. And I would recommend either version to anyone. And the like gist of it basically is that a murder has happened. The wife is being accused of the murder. And so like I think it's a attorney and a police officer. Yeah, the sheriff and the attorney are going to the house where the murder happened and are trying to find motive, trying to find evidence that will convict the wife. And they bring along these women who are their wives. It's like the sheriff's wife and then the neighbor's wife that are supposed to gather up some clothing and things for the woman that is being charged with the murder, so she has some extra clothes in the prison. And while they are doing this, they are actually the ones that are finding the evidence, because they know what women do with their days, where the men are like, women don't know anything and we're gonna be the ones that find it, and like all these women are doing is just talking about sewing and canning and all this stuff. So that's why it's called Trifles, because it's the little trifles that women enjoy or are part of their life, and that those things aren't important, when actually that's what would have solved the murder if men actually listened to women. So written in 1916 and has like a very feminist point of view. So I still would recommend either version. Then next is probably my least favorite book of the entire month. Yeah, definitely my least favorite, because I almost gave this 2 stars, ended up on a 3. This is Daddy Longlegs by Jean Webster. This is a classic. And the thing is that I gave it a 3 instead of a 2 because I think that it's nothing to say wrong with the writing, and it was kind of like compelling in terms of like following this girl. We're following this girl who is aging out of an orphanage, so she's at the kind of age to go to college, but doesn't have any money because she's in this orphanage. And as she's about to age out, she is told by the head of the orphanage that there's this guardian that wants to stay anonymous but wants to pay for her to go to college and get an education, because he sees something in her writing, like she wrote some stories while in the orphanage, and he thinks that she could be a writer, so he sends her to college. And his only stipulation is that she has to write him a letter every single month that she is in schooling, but that he won't write back, that these are just anonymous, like to an anonymous person, but she's just going to tell him about her life and about her schooling. And I don't know how to talk about what I don't like about this without spoiling it, so I'm going to try to be very vague, even though I think that you would catch on pretty quickly of what's happening here. But I feel just very creepy about the relationship that happens in this book towards the end, and like what is actually going on. It just feels very creepy. It gave me the ick factor, and there was just stuff I did not like about it. So after about halfway through the book, I just could not stay invested. I almost stopped reading it. I should have DNF'd it because it just kept making me more uncomfortable until the very end. I was like, oh no, I just do not like this. So maybe I should say it's a 2-star, because I just still have really kind of visceral feelings of not liking this, even though I was really enjoying the first half. I think it's just once you realize the trajectory, it just wasn't for me. It is written in all letters. So if you want an epistolary novel, go ahead, but maybe read some more reviews, because obviously a lot of other people like it more than me. But if you read any spoilery, you would see that most of those are kind of negative, like I was feeling, for the same reason. And then next, I picked up the only graphic book that I read this month, and that is The Moth Keeper by Kay O'Neill. And this is a graphic novel about Anya, who in this culture, they live in the nighttime. So they like sleep during the day, they live in the night, and they have these like trees that are pollinated by moths that are really sacred to their culture, and like I think they get food from it, and yeah, they just have a real connection with these trees, and so they have to take care of these moths. And so there's always somebody from their village who is the moth keeper, and Anya is learning how to do that role. And this book is really about like feeling overwhelmed, about depression, about like asking for help when you feel like a job is too much for you, or you're feeling too lonely and really need that connection. So lots of themes, and something that's very short. I mean, there's not a lot of like words on the page, so this can be read very quickly, but I took my time because I wanted to look at the art. And I did like this. I gave it 4 stars, though I really like the Tea Dragon like series that Kay O'Neill writes and illustrates more than this, because I like the kind of art and characters in that more than this one. I could show you like kind of the beginning, the art. Nothing wrong with it, but I prefer the art in the other one more. And the story was kind of sparse, so this wasn't like my favorite, but I do think it has really good themes, especially for kids. Like this can be read by like a middle grade audience. My daughter read it and she wanted to give it to one of her friends. So I do think it's a good like topic of like, you know, talking about your emotions and loneliness and connecting as a community in a village and supporting each other. I think it's good themes for a young reader, and for anybody to read. Okay, and then next I read Illuminations by T. Kingfisher, and this is one of her middle grade novels, except for I think it's like, I don't know. I feel like it's definitely middle grade, but she published it under T. Kingfisher instead of her real name, Ursula Vernon, and most of her middle grade stuff is all under Ursula Vernon. But I think I had read somewhere that she ended up self-publishing this under her pen name T. Kingfisher because she felt like it was a little too dark to actually be published as a middle grade book. But I gave this to my daughter who is 10, and I don't think for the right middle graders it's too dark. And I think it's like a really excellent book. This was a 5-star story for me. I loved it. It had great themes, and I just really enjoyed the characters and the plot. So basically we are following this girl named Rosa, and her family are illuminarists, painters. They're painters that make illuminations. Basically what illuminations are, so they paint something and then it has like magical properties. So you might have like some type of painting that you put on your door that'll like protect your home from fire, or you might put a painting on a pot that would help the plant to grow and repel any pests. So they are painters that have magical powers imbued into their paintings. And Rosa is, you know, a young girl, so she's not to the point where she's able to do this yet. And she's finding out that like her family is maybe not doing as well. They used to be like one of the like premier painting families in their community, but like people haven't been coming to them for commissions quite as much. And so she wants to help her family. And so she finds this like box that has a crow on it. And when she opens the box, you know, bad things happen, you know, like any good middle grade book. It sets off like a string of things that are going wrong, and she needs to try to like save her family when that was what she was trying to do to begin with, and she made it worse, and now she has to like, you know, fix her mistakes. And that sounds like kind of a lot of different adventure middle grades where, you know, you make a mistake and now you have to like by yourself go and fix it yourself. But I feel like T. Kingfisher takes that common trope and like twists it around and solves it in a different way, which I don't want to tell you how she ends up doing that because that would give away like the last like third of the book. But I really enjoyed the way she approached this trope of like, you know, a kid like messing things up. Now I gotta do it all by myself to fix everything and save my family. common trope, but I really enjoy the way she wrote it and concluded it. There are some intense scenes, which is why I think that she wrote it as T. Kingfisher instead of Ursula Vernon, but nothing that I don't think an older middle grade reader couldn't handle. Like I said, my 10-year-old read it and loved it. I gave it 5 stars, really enjoyed it. So if you like T. Kingfisher's adult stuff, maybe try it, but just keep in mind it is very much a middle grade type of story. It doesn't have some of the real creepy elements that her adult fiction does, but good themes, enjoyed the characters, loved it, 5 stars. And then I picked up another nonfiction. It's a collection of essays. I read a lot of Greek mythology this month. I didn't really realize the theme, but this is a collection of essays about goddesses in Greek myth. Natalie Haynes is a professor of Greek mythology, and so this is definitely dry at times because it's very professory when you're reading this scholarly and not narrative nonfiction. But I really enjoy the way she kind of picks apart the different goddesses and kind of approaches their stories, comparing them to modern entertainment and things. And I just like the way she talks about the Greek myths. And not all, like most essay collections, not all of these were complete hits, but there were a couple that were just, I would reread them and were my favorites. Like, for example, the chapter about Hera and the chapter about Demeter. Probably my favorite interpretations of the mythologies around those goddesses, especially Hera. I feel like there's so much negativity towards Hera, and I get it because she has a tendency to take her vengeance out on the women that her husband is sleeping with instead of on Zeus. But also that makes sense because how is she gonna, fight back with the king of the gods? But I think the way that she frames Hera was really interesting. Same way with Demeter. I mean, a lot of Demeter's chapter was also about Persephone, but we were only focusing on the goddesses in this one, so it's not a chapter technically about Persephone, but there's a lot of her in it. But I really enjoyed the talk about Demeter. Yeah, I did enjoy this all together, 4 stars, but maybe not. I think I gave Pandora's Jar, the other collection of stories or of essays, I think I might have rated that one 5 stars. I'm not sure. Maybe I also gave that 4 stars. So yeah, there are some hits, there are some misses, but definitely still worth a read if you like Greek mythology and you want to kind of see a viewpoint of the goddesses, kind of focusing on them and kind of how they have related to different aspects of society throughout time. Okay, and then the last 2 books I read are in the same series. I read 2 books from the Wayward Children series. This was a book that I had missed. I think it's book 3 or 4, and I'd read books after it because I wanted to kind of read all of the ones that are in Jack and Jill's storyline, and then I was like, I'll come back to this one, and I finally did. This is In an Absent Dream by Shauna Maguire, and this is one that kind of stands on its own. It has a character from the first book and is following her when she was younger and getting pulled into another world. If you don't know about the Wayward Children, it's all about these kids that don't really fit into our society, real life, so they find these doorways to worlds where they would fit in better. Doesn't mean that things always go well when they're in that world. It just means that it kind of fits with their personality. And in this one, we are following Lundy as she is pulled into the goblin market world. And I really enjoyed this one. 4 stars, one of my favorites of the series. I find a lot of times I enjoy the ones that are one-offs, where we are going to the worlds instead of the ones that are taking place in our world. Yeah, so I enjoyed following Lundy since we knew her from the first book, and kind of seeing how she becomes what she is in the first book and kind of her experiences in the goblin market. So yeah, that one was good. I don't have a lot to say about that one though, but this one, favorite book in the series. Lost in the Moment and Found. And this is another one where we are following a girl that we've met in a different book, Antoinette, known as Antsy. And I can't remember which books Antoinette is in, but I know she is in some of the other books. But this is following her as she finds her drawer. And this one is my favorite by far of the series, 5 stars. It's a hard hitter though. Of all of them, they all have some, hard things that these kids are going through, which is part of the reason why they are pulled into other worlds. And this one involves child abuse and grooming, so keep that in mind. There is a trigger warning at the beginning, and Shauna McGuire kind of gives you some information about how it goes. So if you want to kind of know how that is going to go in the story, you could listen to the trigger warning, or you can skip over it if you don't like to know about that. But I appreciate that that was in there. And this one was like just the themes and the connections between the like what was going on in her life before she leaves. So these are so short, I don't want to give a lot away, but basically, like, you know, like I said, there is like some patterns involved with her and her stepfather about the way he's like treating her, that is, you know, as like an adult I can see that he is grooming her and like that he is a predator. And so there's that's what's happening in her life, and then she's pulled into this other world, and the things that are happening in that world are like really a metaphor for what was happening in her real life. And I just, the way that that metaphor like gets played out, I just thought it was genius. I thought the writing in this one was the best of all of the Wayward Children series. So if you are one that likes to skip around, don't miss this one, because I think it's really good. I get that it's a hard topic, and so maybe listen to that content warning before going into it, just to be set up for knowing what's happening. But definitely not one to miss, because I thought this one was really excellent. And that was it. That was the last thing I read in January. Sorry, this is probably a long video because I read a lot of things, but overall really great. Like, as you could tell, of the 14 things, I only had 2 3 stars, and I didn't even like hate Renegades. It's just not really my type of story. So the only one that kind of didn't work for me was Daddy Longlegs, but everything else was really great. 4 and 5 stars. Read a lot of awesome short things. Just felt like really excited about reading throughout the month of January, which is great. Also accomplished a lot of my challenges. Like, I had like 25 books I wanted to read in 2025, and I read 7 of those in January. So that's great. Like 7 out of 25. So that's going to set me up really good for the rest of the year to accomplish those reading goals. I also read one of my big books, one of my 12 big books. So yeah, I'm feeling good about myself and the start of 2025. And that's it for me. If you want to talk about any of these books, I would love to hear from you down below, and I'll see you next time. Bye.